At exactly 7:42 a.m., the front door on Hawthorne Ridge Drive stood open. That alone was wrong. In this quiet Dallas neighborhood, doors didn't stand open, not at dawn, not ever. Parents left for work with travel mugs in hand, children waited for buses under live oaks, and the woman in the beige house on the corner was always the first to wave. Always watching. Always smiling. But this morning, there was no wave. Only silence. The neighbor across the street, a retired electrician named Thomas Reed, noticed it while dragging his trash bin to the curb. He paused, squinting at the open door. The house belonged to Melissa Carter, age 36. Everyone knew Melissa. She was the woman who never left the house without a reason and never let a child cross the street alone. She helped raise her best friend's daughter, Lily Monroe, age 8, the child she called her whole heart. Thomas called out once. No answer. Then he noticed something else. A small pink sneaker lay on the front steps, turned on its side, as if someone had kicked it off in a hurry. Thomas didn't know why his chest tightened, only that it did. He dialed 911 with hands that suddenly felt too large for the phone. By 8:06 a.m., the street was sealed off. Police cars lined the curb. Neighbors whispered in clusters, their voices low and unsure. No one cried yet. Crying required certainty, and at that moment, no one knew what had happened, only that something had gone terribly wrong. Inside the house, officers moved carefully, their boots soft against hardwood floors. The smell hit first, metallic and sharp, the kind that lingered in the back of the throat. In the living room, toys were neatly arranged, untouched. A half-finished puzzle sat on the coffee table, the edges completed, the center still empty. As if time had stopped mid-play. In the hallway, a framed photo hung crooked. It showed two women and a little girl at a birthday party. The child grinned, frosting on her nose. One woman, her mother, Rachel Monroe, age 34, laughed openly. The other, Melissa, held the girl close, her smile tighter, her grip firmer. Family, anyone would have said. Until they reached the bedroom. No one spoke after that. By the time Rachel arrived, called away from her early shift at a medical billing office, news vans were already circling. She parked crookedly, jumped out of her car, and ran barefoot across the pavement. Her face was pale, confused, still believing this was a mistake. Still believing her daughter was late for school. She didn't make it past the tape. An officer stopped her gently, firmly. "Ma'am, where's Lily?" Rachel asked, already shaking her head, already refusing whatever answer was coming. She was supposed to be here. Melissa takes her on Tuesdays. She always takes her. Melissa. The name sat heavy in the air. Rachel twisted toward the house, searching for her friend. The woman she trusted more than anyone. The woman who had stepped in when Lily's father walked out. Who cooked dinners, attended school meetings, braided hair with practiced patience. Melissa, who had said once, half joking, half not, "She's more mine than anyone else's." Rachel had laughed then. She wasn't laughing now. Inside, detectives exchanged looks that required no words. There were signs of a struggle, but not the kind born of chaos. Furniture hadn't been overturned. Nothing was stolen. It was controlled. Intentional. And Melissa Carter was gone. Her car was missing from the driveway. Her phone left behind on the kitchen counter. Her purse untouched. No note. No explanation. Just absence. By mid-morning, Dallas police announced what no one wanted to hear: a child was dead, and the primary suspect was the woman who helped raise her. A trusted friend. A second mother. A citywide manhunt began before noon. Photos of Melissa flooded the news, her calm eyes, her composed smile. Commentators struggled with the contradiction. How could someone so involved, so devoted, do something so unforgivable? Neighbors replayed memories in their minds like broken film reels. The extra hugs. The way Melissa corrected Rachel in public. The way she bristled when Lily called anyone else Mom by accident. Things that once seemed loving now felt wrong. Rachel sat in the back of a police car, wrapped in a blanket she didn't remember being given. She stared at the house, waiting for Melissa to appear on the porch, arms raised, shouting that it was all a misunderstanding. But the porch remained empty. And somewhere in Dallas, Melissa Carter was running. Not panicked. Not screaming. Hiding. As helicopters circled overhead and patrol units fanned across the city, one question echoed louder than sirens and headlines combined. How did love turn into something this monstrous? No one knew yet. But they were about to find out. Long before police tape and flashing lights turned Hawthorne Ridge Drive into a spectacle, before neighbors learned to whisper instead of wave, there were two women who believed they had found safety in each other. Rachel Monroe met Melissa Carter 13 years earlier in a place neither of them liked to remember, a crowded Dallas women's clinic, both waiting for test results that would change nothing and everything at once. Rachel was 21 then, nervous and newly married, clutching a folded pamphlet she kept rereading. Melissa, 23, sat beside her, calm in a way that felt deliberate. They talked because silence felt heavier. By the time their names were called, they had exchanged numbers, laughed about the uncomfortable chairs, and promised to meet for coffee. It was an ordinary beginning, the kind friendships often grow from, nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous. At first, Melissa seemed like exactly what Rachel needed. Rachel's life moved quickly. Her marriage collapsed just 3 years later, leaving her with a newborn daughter and a quiet apartment that echoed at night. Lily arrived screaming and stubborn, a shock of dark hair and wide eyes that seemed always to be watching. Rachel loved her instantly and fiercely, but love didn't erase exhaustion or fear. Melissa was there before Rachel ever asked. She showed up with groceries, cooked meals without being told where the pots were kept, and held Lily in the middle of the night so Rachel could sleep for 2 uninterrupted hours. When Rachel cried, Melissa listened without offering platitudes. When bills stacked up, Melissa helped make spreadsheets. She never judged, never lectured. She simply stayed. Neighbors noticed how seamlessly Melissa slipped into their lives. She had a key to the apartment before Lily was 6 months old. She knew the pediatrician's name, the bedtime routine, the songs that worked when nothing else did. She attended birthday parties and school orientation days as if it were expected. Rachel often introduced her as family. Melissa didn't correct her. There were moments, small, easily dismissed, that hinted at something deeper. Melissa insisted on walking Lily to the playground even when Rachel was home. She bristled when Rachel hired a babysitter once, asking why she hadn't been called first. When Lily started school, Melissa volunteered more hours than Rachel did, rearranging her remote work schedule without complaint. She just loves her, Rachel told herself. We're lucky. And for years, it felt true. Melissa never married. She dated occasionally but nothing lasted. She said relationships were complicated, that she preferred stability. When people asked if she wanted children, she smiled politely and said life hadn't worked out that way. Then she would glance at Lily. As Lily grew, the lines between friend and parent blurred further. Melissa corrected Lily's manners in public, sometimes before Rachel could. She kept spare clothes for her in her own house, toys carefully organized in a bedroom she referred to as Lily's room, though Lily didn't officially live there. Rachel noticed the possessiveness once, only once, when Lily came home excited about a sleepover at a classmate's house. Melissa's smile froze. "Do you really think that's safe?" she asked. "You don't know those parents." Rachel laughed it off. "She can't stay little forever." Melissa didn't laugh back. Still, trust is built slowly, quietly, brick by brick. And Rachel had no reason to tear it down. When her work hours changed, Melissa adjusted without complaint. When Rachel struggled with guilt over being a single mother, Melissa reassured her she was doing everything right. "I'm here," Melissa said often. "You don't have to do this alone." The words sounded like comfort. In hindsight, they sounded like a promise. The turning point, though no one recognized it at the time, came 2 years before Lily's death. Rachel began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The man wasn't serious, but he represented something Melissa had never been part of, a future that didn't revolve around her. Melissa's support turned measured. Her comments sharpened, just slightly. She asked more questions than necessary. She reminded Rachel of Lily's needs, of routines, of stability. "She needs consistency," Melissa said. "She needs people who won't disappear." Rachel didn't argue. She assumed the concern was mutual. When Rachel moved to Hawthorne Ridge Drive, closer to work and Lily's school, Melissa followed, not into the same house, but close enough to be present at all times. She bought the beige corner house within weeks, laughing as she called it a coincidence. From the outside, it looked like loyalty. From the inside, it was something else entirely. On the morning Lily died, Rachel dropped her daughter off as she had dozens of times before. Lily hugged her mother quickly, already reaching for Melissa's hand. "I'll see you after school," Rachel said. Melissa smiled. "Of course you will." Those were the last words Rachel ever heard her say. Trust, once broken, doesn't shatter loudly. It breaks in silence. And by the time Rachel realized the difference between devotion and possession, it was already too late. Lily Monroe had a habit of waving twice. Once was never enough. She waved when she entered a room, when she left it, and again if she thought someone might not have seen the first one. It was a small, endearing quirk, the kind teachers mention with smiles during parent meetings. She waved because she liked being noticed, but more than that, she liked making sure others felt seen too. At 8 years old, Lily was old enough to understand routines and young enough to believe they were permanent. Tuesdays meant Melissa's house. Fridays meant pizza night. Sundays meant pancakes, even if they were lopsided. Her world was predictable, warm, and full of people who loved her. Or so it seemed. Lily was not loud, but she was observant. She remembered who liked their coffee black and who didn't drink it at all. She noticed when adults lowered their voices and when smiles didn't quite reach the eyes. She had learned early that listening mattered. Her teachers described her as empathetic beyond her years. Melissa described her as mine. Rachel never heard that word spoken directly to Lily. Melissa was careful. She saved that language for private conversations, for moments that sounded like jokes but felt heavier in the air. "She's practically my kid," Melissa once said to a neighbor, laughing. Lily had been standing right there. She looked up, unsure whether to smile. From the moment Lily learned to walk, Melissa was close behind, arms hovering just inches away. At first, Rachel appreciated the extra help. Lily was fearless, quick to climb and run, slower to listen. Melissa's vigilance felt like protection. As Lily grew, that vigilance turned into correction. "Careful," Melissa would say, even when there was nothing to be careful about. "Do it this way," even when Lily hadn't asked. Rachel noticed Lily had started glancing at Melissa before answering simple questions, as if checking for approval. When Rachel asked Lily what she wanted for dinner, Lily would pause, eyes drifting sideways. "What do you think, Missy?" she'd ask. Melissa would smile, but something in her gaze hardened, as though the question proved something she had always believed. Rachel tried to gently reassert herself. "Lily, it's okay to decide on your own." Lily nodded quickly, eager to please both women. She learned to balance, to adjust, to be what was needed in the moment. Children are good at that. Too good. At school, Lily thrived. She loved reading aloud and hated math tests. She had a best friend named Ava and a habit of giving away her snacks if she thought someone else looked hungry. Her backpack was always too heavy because she insisted on carrying things, just in case. Teachers adored her. So did Melissa. Perhaps too much. Melissa knew Lily's schedule better than Rachel did. She knew the names of classmates Rachel had never met. She kept Lily's artwork displayed in her house with a care that bordered on reverence, every drawing framed, every misspelled word preserved. Rachel once joked, "You keep more of her stuff than I do." Melissa didn't laugh. "I value what matters." The comment lingered longer than it should have. The summer before Lily turned 8, Melissa suggested a trial week, Lily staying with her full-time while Rachel worked longer hours. "It'll be easier," Melissa said. "For everyone." Rachel hesitated. The idea made her uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. Lily, however, was excited. Melissa's house had fewer rules, more attention. She had her own room there, decorated in soft colors Rachel didn't remember choosing. The trial week never happened. Rachel changed her schedule instead. Melissa accepted it outwardly, but something shifted. Lily noticed it first. Melissa's voice grew tighter, her patience thinner. She corrected Lily more often, praised her less freely. When Lily hugged Rachel goodbye, Melissa's smile flickered. One afternoon, Lily asked a question she'd been holding in. "Why do you get sad when Mommy picks me up?" Melissa knelt, her hands firm on Lily's shoulders. "I don't get sad," she said carefully. "I just miss you when you're gone." Lily nodded, though the answer didn't quite settle. On the morning of the crime, Lily wore her favorite pink sneakers. She had insisted on them, even though one lace was frayed. Rachel had bent down to tie it, promising to fix it later. "Don't forget," Lily said, wagging her finger playfully. "I won't," Rachel replied. Melissa watched from the doorway. Inside the house, investigators would later find Lily's backpack placed neatly by the door, lunch packed and untouched. Her jacket hung on the hook, zipped all the way up, as if someone had prepared her to leave. But Lily never did. What made the loss unbearable wasn't just Lily's death, it was who she had trusted until the very end. She had believed the adults around her knew best. That love was safe. That care didn't come with conditions. Lily waved twice that morning. Once to her mother. Once to the woman who would betray her. And somewhere between those two waves, childhood ended in the most irreversible way possible. The official timeline began at 7:58 a.m. That was when Melissa Carter's security system disarmed itself. Investigators would later replay that moment repeatedly, staring at the timestamp as if it might confess something new. It didn't. It only confirmed what they already feared, that whatever happened next was not spontaneous. It was planned. Measured. Executed with chilling calm. Inside the beige house on Hawthorne Ridge Drive, the morning unfolded like dozens before it. Breakfast dishes were set out neatly. Lily's lunch was packed with careful precision, apple slices, a sandwich cut diagonally, a handwritten note folded just once. "Have a good day, sweet girl." The note was unsigned. Lily had been in the living room, shoes on, backpack ready. There were no signs of panic in that space. No overturned chairs. No broken glass. The investigators would later describe it as too clean, a phrase that carried more weight than it sounded like it should. The first anomaly appeared in the hallway. A framed photo knocked askew. A faint scuff mark along the wall. Evidence of a struggle that had been brief, contained, and one-sided. Lily was small. Trusting. She had no reason to run. The medical examiner would later say the injuries suggested hesitation, then resolve. A moment where the woman Lily trusted most faltered, followed by a decision that could not be undone. By 8:14 a.m., it was over. Melissa moved through the house with a precision that stunned seasoned detectives. She cleaned what needed cleaning. She changed clothes. She placed Lily where she would not be immediately visible, delaying discovery just long enough to gain a head start. Then she left. Her car was captured on a neighbor's doorbell camera at 8:21 a.m., pulling away slowly, deliberately. No screeching tires. No rush. She stopped fully at the end of the street before turning, as if she were leaving for groceries. When police arrived less than an hour later, the house was quiet in the way only tragedy makes it quiet. Officers spoke in low voices, radios muted. One detective paused in the doorway longer than necessary, staring at the ordinary space now irrevocably altered. Outside, Rachel Monroe's screams cut through the air when she was told the truth. Inside, investigators worked backward. They found Melissa's phone on the kitchen counter, wiped clean of recent messages. Her laptop was gone. Her car, missing. Bank records showed a withdrawal 2 days earlier, cash, an amount just large enough to matter. The absence spoke louder than any note could have. By noon, Dallas police held a press briefing. The words were chosen carefully, but the meaning was unmistakable. The suspect was someone the victim knew intimately. Someone trusted. Someone who had vanished. A photograph of Melissa appeared on screens across the city, her composed smile now transformed into a symbol of dread. Calls flooded in. Sightings. Tips. None confirmed. The manhunt expanded rapidly. Patrol units canvassed nearby neighborhoods. Highway cameras were reviewed. Airports alerted. Melissa's name lit up databases and watch lists. Rachel was taken to the station, though not as a suspect. She sat in a small room, answering questions she barely heard. "When was the last time you spoke to her? Did she seem upset? Did you argue recently?" Rachel's answers were fractured, looping back on themselves. "She wouldn't hurt her," she said over and over. She loved her. One detective, a father himself, looked down at his notes and said nothing. As the afternoon wore on, cracks began to form in the narrative Rachel had believed for years. Friends were interviewed. Neighbors spoke. Small details emerged, comments Melissa had made, boundaries she had crossed, moments that felt wrong in hindsight. She acted like the child was hers, one neighbor said quietly. "She didn't like sharing," said another. By evening, the story had escaped police control entirely. News anchors speculated. Social media exploded. Strangers dissected Melissa's face, her posture, her past. Some defended her. Others condemned her. The word monster appeared more than once. Rachel sat alone, watching the footage on a muted television. Each replay felt like a betrayal layered atop another. She remembered Melissa braiding Lily's hair, singing her to sleep, promising she'd always keep her safe. Outside, volunteers gathered, lighting candles along the sidewalk. Stuffed animals piled up near the police tape. Someone taped a handwritten sign to a tree, "Justice for Lily." As night fell, helicopters hovered overhead, their searchlights cutting across rooftops and empty parking lots. Melissa Carter was still out there, alone, hunted, silent. What no one knew yet was that she was not running without purpose. She had somewhere to go. Somewhere she believed would finally make sense of what she had done. And while the city searched for her in plain sight, Melissa was already disappearing, into a place where the truth had been buried long before Lily ever was. The worst day was over. The unthinkable had only just begun. By the second morning, Dallas no longer felt like a city going about its business. It felt like a held breath. Melissa Carter's face stared out from television screens in grocery stores, gas stations, and waiting rooms. The words wanted for questioning scrolled beneath her photograph, though everyone understood what that really meant. A trusted caregiver. A dead child. A suspect who had vanished. Schools tightened security. Parents walked their children to class, gripping small hands harder than usual. Conversation stalled mid-sentence when someone mentioned a family friend or babysitter. Trust, so casually given before, now felt fragile, suspect. At police headquarters, the investigation moved with controlled urgency. Tips poured in by the hundreds. A woman matching Melissa's description seen near a bus terminal. A car like hers spotted outside a motel. Each lead raised hope, then collapsed under scrutiny. Detective Angela Ruiz, assigned to the case, pinned photographs and timelines across a wall already running out of space. Patterns mattered now. Melissa wasn't acting randomly. Her movements before the crime suggested preparation, not panic. Financial records revealed more unsettling details. Melissa had closed a small savings account weeks earlier. She had transferred files from her personal laptop to an external drive that was never recovered. She had quietly requested copies of Lily's birth certificate and school records months before, requests that had gone unnoticed at the time. Why would a family friend need those? The answer, whatever it was, did not sit comfortably with anyone. Rachel Monroe remained in a state between shock and collapse. Friends tried to help, bringing food she could not eat, offering words she could not absorb. At night, she lay awake replaying memories, searching for warnings she had dismissed. There were so many. Melissa's insistence on being listed as an emergency contact. Her irritation when Rachel corrected Lily. The way she spoke about Lily's father with disdain, as if erasing him from the child's life was a moral service. She needs people who won't abandon her, Melissa had said. Rachel had agreed. Now those words echoed with a new, terrifying meaning. Public opinion shifted rapidly. What began as disbelief hardened into outrage. Online forums dissected Melissa's past, her work history, her lack of relationships. Amateur psychologists diagnosed her from afar, throwing around terms like obsession and delusion. But one revelation changed the tone entirely. A former coworker came forward, claiming Melissa had once confided something deeply unsettling. She had believed Lily was meant to be hers, that fate, not biology, determined motherhood. The comment had been brushed off as strange but harmless at the time. Now it sounded like a confession waiting years to be understood. Detectives revisited Melissa's house, combing through what had once seemed ordinary. Hidden behind neatly stacked storage boxes, they found a locked drawer. Inside were journals, pages filled with careful handwriting, dated, meticulous. They didn't read them immediately. They waited for warrants, for process, for legality. But they already knew. As the city watched and waited, Melissa remained invisible. No confirmed sightings. No digital footprint. It was as if she had stepped off the map. Until a truck stop attendant 2 counties away called in a tip. A woman had paid in cash, avoided cameras, and asked for directions to a rural area north of the city. The description fit. The time frame matched. Police rerouted resources instantly. Highway patrol units fanned out. Unmarked vehicles took back roads. The search radius narrowed. Meanwhile, the press dug deeper. A scandalous detail emerged late that evening. Melissa had once attempted to file for guardianship years earlier, citing Rachel's work hours and emotional strain. The petition had been denied, quietly dismissed, and sealed. Rachel hadn't known. The revelation ignited fury. How did this happen? People asked. Why wasn't anyone warned? Candlelight vigils turned into protests demanding accountability, from the system, from the courts, from anyone who might have stopped this. Grief had found a voice, and it was loud. At the same time, something else stirred beneath the anger. Fear. Because if someone like Melissa, educated, composed, trusted, could do this, then safety was an illusion. The city felt smaller. Closer. As if danger could be hiding behind any polite smile. Late that night, Detective Ruiz stood alone in the briefing room, staring at the map of Texas dotted with red markers. One location stood out, not because it had been confirmed, but because it made sense. A place Melissa had once mentioned in passing. A place tied to her childhood. A place where she had learned to disappear. Ruiz circled it slowly, then picked up the phone. "Redirect the search," she said. "I think she's not running anymore." Outside, sirens wailed again, cutting through the dark. Dallas held its breath. And somewhere beyond the city limits, Melissa Carter waited, watching the world turn against her, convinced she had already lost everything that mattered. The city was on edge. The end was drawing closer. No one was prepared for how it would arrive. The journals arrived at police headquarters just after sunrise, sealed in evidence bags that felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Detective Angela Ruiz didn't open them immediately. Experience had taught her that some truths couldn't be unread. Once seen, they rearranged everything, facts, motives, even memory itself. She gathered her team, closed the door, and only then broke the seal. Melissa Carter's handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost elegant. Each entry was dated. Each page carefully numbered. There were no frantic scribbles, no signs of instability at first glance. That was the most disturbing part. The early entries spoke of loneliness. Of feeling invisible. Of watching other women build families while she remained on the outside, applauding politely. She wrote about Rachel with admiration, envy disguised as loyalty. "Rachel doesn't see how lucky she is," one entry read. "She was given everything I was denied." Then Lily was mentioned. At first, tenderly. "She fits into my life the way something missing finally returns." The language shifted gradually, almost imperceptibly. What began as affection hardened into certainty. Melissa stopped referring to Lily as Rachel's daughter. She called her the child. Then my child. Eventually, just mine. One entry stopped the room cold. "Biology is an accident. Love is intention." Another followed weeks later. "Rachel is careless with what she's been given. I am not." Detectives exchanged glances. The motive was emerging, not rage, not impulse, but belief. A belief so entrenched it justified anything that stood in its way. The most damning revelation came near the back of the final journal. Melissa had been planning to leave. Not alone. She had researched custody laws in other states. She had looked up school enrollment requirements under assumed guardianship. She had even written lists, new names, new routines, a future rewritten from scratch. But something had gone wrong. The entry dated 3 days before Lily's death was different. The handwriting tighter. The sentences shorter. "Rachel knows. She's pulling away. She thinks I don't see it." Rachel's recent dating, her decision to keep Lily home more often, her refusal of the trial week, Melissa interpreted all of it as theft. "If I can't protect her," the entry concluded, "no one will." The room was silent. This wasn't a crime born of sudden madness. It was a conclusion Melissa had reasoned her way into, step by step, lie by lie, until the unthinkable felt inevitable. When the findings were released to the public, the reaction was explosive. The narrative shifted from tragedy to scandal. Headlines screamed about obsession disguised as friendship. Commentators argued over responsibility, Rachel's trust, the system's failure, society's blind spots. Some voices, quieter but persistent, even tried to frame Melissa as a victim of circumstance. Rachel heard none of it. She sat with Detective Ruiz, listening as the motive was explained, her face hollowing with each sentence. When it was over, she asked one question. So she thought, killing my child was saving her? Ruiz didn't answer immediately. There was no answer that could live comfortably in the air. Yes, she said finally. I think she did. The knowledge shattered something final inside Rachel. Grief gave way to fury, clean, sharp, and endless. The woman she had trusted hadn't just betrayed her. She had rewritten reality to justify the unforgivable. Meanwhile, the manhunt narrowed. Search teams focused on a rural property outside the city, a long-abandoned hunting cabin tied to Melissa's late father. Utility records showed brief activity. A nearby gas station camera captured a car similar to hers passing through days earlier. Melissa was there. Alone. Inside the cabin, Melissa moved carefully, conserving supplies. She listened to the radio updates with a detached calm. Each mention of Lily's name tightened something in her chest, not guilt, but loss. She believed the world had misunderstood her. They always did. She reread her journals, convinced they would one day explain everything. That someone, somewhere, would see her logic. Her love. Her sacrifice. But as the search closed in, another realization settled over her, quiet, unavoidable. There would be no future. The child she had built her life around was gone. The plan had failed. The world would never accept her truth. By the time police surrounded the area, Melissa had already made her final decision. In Dallas, as news broke that authorities were closing in, the city leaned toward its screens once more. People waited for an arrest, for justice in handcuffs and courtrooms. They would not get it. Because some motives are too warped to coexist with consequence. And Melissa Carter had chosen an ending no one could interrupt. The road to the cabin did not appear on most maps. It peeled off the highway like a forgotten thought, narrowing into gravel and then dirt, winding through scrub oak and cedar until the air felt heavier and the silence more complete. This was where Melissa Carter had learned, as a child, that disappearing was not the same as being lost. Her father had brought her here on weekends when she was young, a man who believed solitude built character. The cabin had no electricity then, no running water, only a wood stove and a radio that caught one station on a clear day. Melissa had hated it at first. Then she had learned to love the quiet. The way the world receded. Now, years later, she sat at the small table with the radio murmuring low, the same station crackling through reports she already knew by heart. Authorities believe the suspect is armed and dangerous. Melissa turned the volume down. Armed was a generous assumption. Dangerous, perhaps. But not in the way they meant. She had arranged the cabin carefully. Food stacked. Water rationed. Her father's old tools hung neatly by the door. On the table lay the journals, aligned, their corners squared. She had reread them all, lingering on the entries that felt most misunderstood. Outside, the forest shifted with afternoon light. Somewhere far off, a helicopter passed, its sound faint but unmistakable. Melissa felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same one that had carried her through the last terrible hours. They were close. At police command, Detective Angela Ruiz watched the feed from a drone sweep across the tree line. Thermal imaging picked up a structure hidden beneath the canopy. A vehicle parked behind it, partially covered with branches. This is it, Ruiz said. Teams moved in slowly, methodically. Negotiators stood ready. Paramedics waited just beyond the perimeter. The plan was to surround, contain, and arrest. Clean. Controlled. No mistakes. No one said the other word. Inside the cabin, Melissa heard the crunch of boots long before the first voice called out. Melissa Carter. Dallas Police. We're here to talk. She closed her eyes. Talk. She had imagined this moment differently. Once, she had pictured explaining herself, laying out the logic, the devotion, the reasons no one had wanted to hear. She had imagined Rachel listening, finally understanding the depth of her care. Now she knew better. They would never listen. They would never understand. The world had already decided who she was. Melissa stood and walked to the window. Through the glass, she could see movement, shadows between trees, the glint of metal. A perimeter tightening like a net. Another voice, calmer this time. Melissa, you're not in trouble right now. We just want to make sure everyone is safe. The lie did not offend her. It only confirmed what she already knew. Everyone was not safe. Not anymore. Her gaze fell to the journals. For a brief moment, she considered leaving them behind, letting the police find them, letting the words speak when she no longer could. Then she shook her head. Words could be twisted, taken out of context. She gathered them instead, pressing them to her chest, feeling their weight. "Melissa," the negotiator called again. "We know you're in there. Please come out." The cabin creaked softly as the wind shifted. Melissa thought of Lily, of the way she used to fall asleep mid-sentence, her trust absolute, her world simple. The memory cut deeper than any accusation ever could. "I tried," Melissa whispered, though no one could hear her. Outside, Ruiz checked her watch. Time stretched, thick with anticipation. Every officer present knew the signs, the quiet, the delay, the way the radio had gone silent from inside the cabin. "This isn't right," Ruiz said softly. A single sound broke the stillness. Then nothing. No movement. No response. The order came swiftly after, a careful advance, weapons raised, voices urgent now rather than coaxing. The cabin door was forced open, hinges protesting loudly as light spilled into the dark interior. They found Melissa seated at the table. The journals lay open before her. She was still. The paramedics moved in, then stopped. One shook his head, slow and definitive. Melissa Carter was dead. She had taken her own life moments before police entered, choosing silence over surrender, control over consequence. There was no note, no final explanation, only the carefully ordered pages of a life rearranged to justify the unjustifiable. As the news broke, Dallas reacted with a stunned quiet that felt different from grief or anger. This was something colder. Emptier. No trial. No answers shouted across a courtroom. No opportunity for confrontation or closure. Rachel received the call in the early evening. She listened without speaking, her face unreadable. When the officer finished, she said only, "Okay," and hung up. Later, she would cry. Later, she would rage. But in that moment, all she felt was the finality. Melissa had taken her secrets with her. Justice, whatever that word meant now, would have to find another shape. The cabin was sealed. Evidence logged. The searchlights dimmed. The manhunt was over. What remained was a silence that would haunt everyone involved, and a question that no ending, however definitive, could ever fully answer. The city woke the next morning without sirens. That alone felt wrong. For days, Dallas had existed in a constant state of alarm, news alerts, police helicopters, conversations that never quite finished. When word spread that the manhunt had ended, people expected noise. Closure. Something loud enough to match the devastation. Instead, there was silence. The official statement came just after sunrise. Authorities confirmed that Melissa Carter had died by suicide before she could be taken into custody. There would be no trial. No plea. No verdict spoken aloud. The case, they said, was closed. No one believed that. Outside Rachel Monroe's house, the memorial had grown into something unmanageable. Flowers wilted in the heat. Candles melted into pools of wax that stained the pavement. Stuffed animals leaned against one another as if trying to stand guard. Rachel stood at the window, watching strangers kneel and pray for a child they had never met. She felt nothing. Grief had passed through her like a storm days earlier, violent, consuming, leaving wreckage behind. What remained now was a hollow quiet, a numbness that made time feel unreal. The woman who had taken her child would never face her. Never hear Lily's name spoken in anger or sorrow. Melissa had chosen her own ending. That, somehow, felt like one final theft. The media moved quickly, dissecting the suicide with the same hunger they had once chased the manhunt. Experts debated motives. Headlines argued whether justice had been denied or spared. Some insisted Melissa's death proved guilt. Others whispered darker theories, as if complexity could soften what had been done. Rachel turned off the television. At the funeral, Lily's casket was small and white, adorned with drawings from classmates, crayons melting slightly under the weight of meaning children weren't old enough to carry. Her teacher cried openly. So did the bus driver. Rachel spoke only once. She trusted us, she said, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. And we failed her. There was no mention of Melissa by name. In the weeks that followed, investigations closed, files archived, and officers reassigned. Detective Angela Ruiz returned to other cases, though this one followed her home in ways she didn't expect. She found herself watching parents at playgrounds, noting who hovered too close, who smiled too long. Trust, once broken, does not heal cleanly. The journals were locked away, sealed by court order. Their contents would never be fully released. Some truths, officials decided, served no public good. Others argued transparency was owed. The debate went nowhere. Rachel moved houses 3 months later. Hawthorne Ridge Drive held too many echoes. She donated Lily's toys, kept the drawings, and packed away the pink sneakers, the frayed lace still tied. Sometimes, late at night, she replayed the last morning. The hug. The promise. The wave. Twice. People asked her if she felt relief knowing Melissa was dead. Rachel never answered. Because relief suggested balance. An equation solved. There was no balance. No solution. Only a hole where a child's future should have been. As the story faded from headlines, it lingered in quieter spaces, in parenting forums, in whispered warnings, in the way people now flinched at the phrase, like family. The case became a cautionary tale told without names, stripped of nuance, flattened into a headline. But those who lived it knew better. They knew how easily love could turn possessive. How devotion, unchecked, could rot into entitlement. How trust, once misplaced, could become the most dangerous thing of all. On the anniversary of Lily's death, Rachel returned to the memorial tree that still stood near the old house. The city had tried to remove it once. Neighbors had protested. It remained. Rachel placed a small note beneath the branches. It read, "You were seen. You were loved. You mattered." No names. No explanations. The wind stirred the leaves gently, carrying the words away. Melissa Carter's story ended in a cabin, alone, convinced of her own righteousness to the final moment. There were no last words to examine, no confession to analyze. Only the consequences she left behind. A mother without a child. A city without its innocence. And a silence that spoke louder than any verdict ever could. Because some crimes do not end when the suspect is gone. They live on, in memory, in mistrust, in the spaces where certainty once lived. And in the quiet understanding that the most unthinkable acts often come not from strangers, but from the ones we invite closest to our lives.